Hello everybody, I'm Steven Downer Jr., and I am the commissioner of the McHunkers Sluggers League. Now, I did not record a lot of Season 1. I only did a little bit of Week 5 and some of the semifinals, which I regret. I wish I recorded all of it, because that would be amazing, but here we are. Season 1 ended end of October, and I'm going to go over all of it. Well, not all of it, but the important bits, and like who the teams are, and yada yada yada, because that'll be important for Season 2, because I will make damn sure that I'm recording all of it, just as there's an archive. If you have no idea what Sluggers is, it is a Mario baseball game for the Wii and the GameCube, but I think the Wii version's better. That's besides the point. Basically, if you have the Dolphin emulator, you can get a CPU versus CPU mod, and you can just have the CPU play. And this is not an original idea. I got this from Akamos or Kamos off of YouTube. You should go watch his seasons. They're largely better than the few videos that I posted, because he goes into a lot of detail. He's the GOAT. He's the one that I got this from. So if he ever sees this, how's it going? Like, I don't know. And again, I would highly recommend watching his videos, because that's where I get a lot of my rule sets from, and that, kind of important, I guess. I made some changes, but those aren't really that relevant, and if it gets to the point where I need to explain them, I will. So the most important part of the league were the teams, and there were 9 of us, I know, an uneven amount, but we played 18 weeks. Each of us had 2 byes, so that's 16 games played total. And starting off with the first team, which is my team, the Vermonsters, with our captain, Mario. Next, we had the Birdo Rings. Obviously, the captain was Birdo. Then we had the Bowser Monsters, Captain Bowser. Makes sense. We had the Kangaroos, who were captained by Yoshi. Then we had the Daisy Noodlers, obviously Daisy. Then we had the Sam Simians, who was captained by Donkey Kong himself. Then we had the Morbidly Obese, which was captained by Wario. Then we had the Peach Monarchs, obviously Peach. And then we had the Luigi Mansions, obviously Luigi. And what would these teams be without their players? So let me go over each team's individual starting roster, which is only going to be 9 starting players. I don't need to tell you the bench warmers, because they warmed the bench and really never came off the bench. But if there are going to be some players that were bench warmers that came on and made a big difference, I'll let you know who they are. Let's start off with my team, the Vermonsters. My pitcher was Mario, also known as the poster child. My second pitcher was Britter, aka Brown Critter. My catcher was King K. Rool. My first basewoman was Margaret Qualley, a me. My second baseman was Brown Critter when he wasn't the backup pitcher. He was also starred. My third baseman was Kendrick Lamar. My shortstop was Firebro. My left fielder was Yellow Toad, aka P-Toad. My center fielder was Toadette. And my right fielder was Purple Toad, aka Purple Drank, aka the GOAT. So, the Birdo Rings, their pitcher was Birdo, aka Catherine, which is apparently her canonical name. I don't know if that's real or not, but we'll go with it. The backup pitcher was Pink Pianta. Their catcher was Ordovis, who is a me. Their first baseman was Green Drybones. Second baseman was Pink Pianta when he wasn't pitching, obviously. Their third baseman, my bad, is Green Critter, aka Gritter. Their shortstop was Hammerbro. Their left fielder was Jalen Hurts, a me. Center fielder was Green Shy Guy, and their right fielder was the Stinkler, a me. The Bowser Monsters, their starting pitcher was Boo. Their backup pitcher was Blue Pianta, and when Blue Pianta wasn't pitching, he was playing catcher. Their first baseman was Bowser. Their second baseman was Blue Drybones, who was starred. Their third baseman was Joe. Their shortstop was Green Magicoop, aka Greejacoop. Their left fielder was LeBron James, a me. Their center fielder was Red Yoshi, and their right fielder was Green Toad, aka Grode. And it is very, very important to note that the Bowser Monsters got Greejacoop in a trade, which they traded to the Kangaroos, because they originally had Ritter, and the trade was the Monsters received Greejacoop in a first-round overall pick and Grode, and the Kangaroos received Ritter, which was a monumental trade around week 5, 6, which really shook up the league, because Ritter was a very important piece on the Monsters, and nobody thought the Monsters would do good after that, and everybody thought that the Kangaroos had the finals in their grasp. But that is a story for later. The Kangaroos are a very interesting team, because they are very different from when they started. But their pitcher is Wiggler. Their second pitcher is MVPD, aka PD Piranha. Their catcher was Dark Drybones, aka D-Day. Their first baseman was Bug, which they received in a trade with the morbidly obese. It was 1-for-1. The Kangaroos gave the morbidly obese Shohei Ohtani, and in return received Bug Coop. The third baseman was Yoshi. The second baseman was Red Critter, aka Ritter. The left fielder is Red Toad, aka Road. And I skipped over shortstop, which is where MVPD laid down a lot of the business. The center fielder is Brock Purdy, aka BCB, me. And the right fielder is Reggie, aka Red Magikoopa. The Nate Noodlers, which I forgot that they were called the Nate Noodlers, not the Daisy Noodlers. Their starting pitcher was Daisy. Their backup pitcher was Piss Wizard, aka Yellow Magikoop. Their catcher was Yellow Pianta. Their first baseman, Mogwoman, me. Their second baseman, Boomerang Bro. Their third baseman, Bowser Jr., the GOAT. Their shortstop is Yellow Magikoopa when he's not pissing. Well, yeah. Their left fielder was Nate, me. Their center fielder was Baby Daisy. And their right fielder was Steve, me, aka Mr. Double Play. The Sam Simians had DK as their starting pitcher, Diddy Kong as their backup pitcher, Baby Mario as their catcher, Diddy Kong as their first baseman, Sam, me, as their second baseman, Jug Coop, Bug Coop's older brother, and a 3-time Wii Board Party champion at third base. At shortstop, they had Light Blue Yoshi or Libloshi. Is where Diddy Kong resided when he wasn't pitching. At center field, Tiny Kong held down the fort. And on right field was Paragoomba, who did not fit into this scheme at all. Next, we have the Morbidly Obese, with their starting pitcher being Waluigi, followed by their second pitcher, Blue Magikoopa. Rhiannon was their catcher. Shohei Ohtani, their first baseman. Second base was Yellow Yoshi, or Yoshi. Their third baseman was Wario. At shortstop, they had Blue Magikoopa. At left field, they had Stickler, me. In center field, they had Yellow Shy Guy. And in right field, they had Dimitri, me. The Peach Monarchs started Peach as their pitcher. Their backup pitcher was Blue Critter, or Blitter, or the Obliterator. Their catcher was King Boo. Their first baseman, Blue Shy Guy. Their second baseman, Pink Yoshi. Their third baseman, the GOAT, Monty Mole. At shortstop, they had Obliterator. In left field, they had Blooper. In center field, they had Cam, me. And in right field, they had Evil Steve, me. And I just want to note that Blooper was a 1-for-1 trade with the Luigi Mansions very early on in the season. The Peach Monarchs obviously received Blooper, but they traded Baby Peach to the Luigi Mansions. And finally, we have the Luigi Mansions. Their starting pitcher was Funky Kong. Their second pitcher was Luigi. At catcher is where Dry Bones, just the regular one, that's where he stayed. That's where he resided. Their first baseman was Koopa, not the GOAT. Luigi resided on second base when he wasn't pitching second. At third base was Jean d'Arc, me, obviously. At shortstop was Black Shy Guy, or Gray Shy Guy. He's a gray guy, and I got that from Commas. At left field was Baby Kong. In center field was Baby Peach, and in right field was Baby Luigi. And the Mansions had a very clear goal of trying to get every baby on the team, but that didn't work because the Simians and the Noodlers refused to ever trade a baby to him. You're probably wondering, how did these teams fare throughout the regular season? And I'm going to tell you right now, starting from 9 to 1. Last to first, if that makes sense. In ninth was the Peach Monarchs. They finished 3-13 with a negative 71 point differential. Then we have the Luigi Mansions in 8th at 4-12 with a negative 72 point differential. That is the worst in the league. Then we have the Morbidly Obese at 4-12 with a negative 53 point differential. And after this, all of these teams made it into the playoffs. And I'm just going to do a little tangent here. The top 6 teams made it into the playoffs. The 1 and 2 seed got a bye. And that's how the playoffs will work, just for reference. So the 6th seed were the Sam Simians, who finished 5-11 at a negative 50 point differential. And that is the last team with a losing record. The 5th seed was the Nate Noodlers, who finished 9-7 with a negative 8 point differential. That is the last point differential in the negatives. The Kangaroos finished as the 4th seed, also at 9-7, with a plus 59 point differential. The 3rd seed was the Vermonsters at 11-5, with a plus 60 point differential. The 2 seed, who got a bye, was the Bowser Monsters at 13-3 with a plus 33 point differential. And the 1st seed was the Birdo Rings at 14-2 at plus 100. So, now that we know all of the records, who was the best team in the regular season, who was the worst team in the regular season, let's go over each team's story, because each team has a specific story to tell, because they each play a part in a much, much bigger story.
Oh no!
The Peach Monarchs was just an entire story of misfortune. and to be fair, they didn't really play all too awful. They lost in a lot of close games, and I mean a lot of close games. And they finished the season 3-13, as I mentioned before, but you got to look at the games that they did win, because that is very important. They won 2 games against the Morbidly Obese, and this has sparked a rivalry between them, as in Week 18, their win against the Obese single-handedly put the Obese out of the playoffs, which, you know, there's a lot of beef there between the two teams because of that now. Their only other win was against the Vermonsters in Week 8, and they won 7-5 in a completely defensive game. The Vermonsters, up until this point, were a heavily offensive team, putting up 10-plus points almost every single game, and were looking almost unbeatable besides the Birdo Rings, who had put them in their place earlier in the season. And the Monarchs' defense is what completely kept them in this game, keeping the Vermonsters to only 5 runs, and them themselves putting up 7 to completely upset the Vermonsters in the 9th inning, where Pink Yoshi had a breakout game, getting his first home run of the season. I think one of the first home runs for the Monarchs as a franchise. And circling back to the whole a lot of close games thing, their defense is why the games were close, because offensively they just always seemed to lack. And I'm not saying that to put the team down, but they just always seemed to not be able to get home or really even get on base. And it was their defense that really stepped up. An Obliterator, easily one of the best defensive players in the league, that just happened to be on the Monarchs. And we'll have to see if he wants to stay there and you know, pray that the team can do better next season, or maybe find somewhere else to go. The Luigi Mansions is just a story of interesting choices, and all of these choices date back all the way to the draft, and that's where they battled the Simians to split up the Apes, because if the Simians had all of the Apes, they would have been a super team, and I think the same Simians would have been a much higher rank, and I think could have battled the Rings for that top seed. But because the Mansions had the first pick of the draft, and they picked Funky Kong, and then in later rounds picked Baby DK, that completely threw off the chemistry for the Simians, and that's why I think that they ended up as the 6th seed. But there were some more interesting choices, like them trading Blooper away to the Monarchs for Baby Peach to have the baby team, quote unquote, and they tried to get Baby Daisy from the Noodlers, and they tried to get Baby Mario from the Simians, but it just never worked. And looking at the record again, they're 4-12, but you got to look at some of their wins, some of those being against the Peach Monarchs, so, you know, the worst team in the league. And one of those being against the Simians, and the other one being in Week 2 against the Bowser Monsters, which completely threw off the power rankings for everybody for the entire season, because they remembered that the Mansions beat the Monsters. And that was insane, because that was one of the only times that the Monsters had lost the entire season. And if the Monsters had won that, they would have been the 1 seed going into the playoffs. So all the way back in Week 2 affected the Monsters going into the playoffs. And with players like Funky Kong, Baby DK, Gray Shy Guy, they were expecting some levels of competition, and the chemistry between all the babies made that outfield really good in theory and on paper, but it just never really worked out that way, and there's no real reason why they never were a good competing team, and they got squashed a lot. But there were some games that they kept really close, like against the Kangaroos. In one of the later weeks, they almost won. They almost won against the Noodlers. there were some signs of life within this team, but just not enough. And that could just date to some of the interesting choices that this team made. The Morbidly Obese were just a story of Miis. They were plagued by Miis their entire season, and not entirely why they ended up with a 4-12 record, but a little bit of the reason. Wario was their captain, so by and any logic, you would take Waluigi next, so that there's chemistry there, and then there's not a lot of Miis that work with them, and there's not a lot of Sluggers characters that work with them, because the only chemistry that Wario and Waluigi have is with each other and then with yellow and purple Miis. And the Miis that were drafted just never seemed to really stick out or do anything too great. Dimitri was really the only Mii that really had some punch to him. Rhiannon struggled quite a bit, and then Rich Ann was put in as a replacement, but was even worse. So Rhiannon was put back in and managed to lock in a little bit towards the end of the season, but just too late for the Morbidly Obese. And as you know, they were knocked out of the playoffs by the Peach Monarchs, giving the Monarchs their third win and final win of the season, and delivering the Morbidly Obese a sad ending to their season. Trading away Bug, who did not fit the scheme for Shohei, who did fit in there, was a really smart play because the offense showed noticeable differences for being just better with Shohei being on the team, which is good for Shohei because on the Kangaroos, he sucked, which you would not expect out of Shohei, but he did. And he came back to life on the Morbidly Obese, which is nice. We love to see that because he was given a chance, and Bug was given a chance on the Kangaroos Week 18 and going into the playoffs. But other than that, the Morbidly Obese have just stuck themselves in a weird situation where they're kind of stuck with keeping Wario and Waluigi and trying to get these Miis that are yellow and purple so that they can keep this chemistry going, especially with some new revelations on chemistry with bases loaded and that giving increased hit power and slap hitting chances or something like that, which was very interesting and adds a lot more depth to the game. Wario was arguably one of the most disappointing captains of the year. There is a more disappointing captain, we'll get to him later, but Wario in spring training did pretty well, and he didn't get a single home run until the double-digit weeks. I'm forgetting which week it is because we didn't take stats on that, to be exact, but very disappointing, and was just an easy out for every other team, which is very unfortunate because we're expecting a lot more out of him, while Luigi can only do so much as he has awful charge hit power, and then you can only expect so much out of Blue Madge, but he did breathe life into the offense by getting the team's first home run ever. So hopefully with stat changes, which I'll talk about later in this video, something will happen for them, but that is all up to luck and chance. The Sam Simians were a team just full of hope, as they barely made it to the 6th seed to make it into the playoffs, because Week 18 was the most important game for them, as they needed to beat the Luigi Mansions to make it to the playoffs, because if they had lost and the Morbidly Obese had won, then the Morbidly Obese would have made it into the playoffs instead of them, which is crazy to think about, but that is not what happened. And a lot of hope was needed, as DK was their main offensive piece, and even when he was doing really well, the team would lose, which sucks because there just wasn't any other real heavy hitters, and the ape chemistry was ruined by Funky Kong and Baby DK, the other big sluggers out of the ape team being on the Luigi Mansions. One of their biggest wins of the season was against the Kangaroos on Peach Ice Garden, one of the first times Peach Ice Garden was even played, because that is a very hated map in the McHunkers Sluggers community. They came back at the bottom or top of the ninth, I'm forgetting exactly which one, but down quite a handful of points to come back and win it, and upsetting the Kangaroos, and which is, again, one of the reasons that they even made it, giving the team a lot of hope, and it was well-deserved hope because, again, it led them right into the playoffs, which 3 other teams can't say that they did. And that's kind of where the monuments and accolades of this team hinder and stop, because The rest of the season wasn't too great. They were either keeping the game a little close or getting completely snuffed out when they were losing. There was no real in between. They either played well and then would lose it kind of midway through the game, or they played absolutely horrid from the first inning. They did have one really close game against the Rings where everybody thought that they were actually going to pull off the upset, but that unfortunately didn't happen, and we'll see who they retain as their main captain. If it's going to be DK or Diddy Kong, it would be smart for DK to be that captain retained, but you never know what goes on in an owner's meeting room. The Nate Noodlers is a story full of upsets in every single sense that you want to think about it. They upset teams, they had upsetting games, they lost in upsetting ways, they upset other teams in upsetting ways. Every single sense, there was some sort of upset with this team. Daisy has one of the most ethical, best star pitches in the game, which he unfortunately didn't use, which is an upset. They finished the season 9-7, which is a little bit of an upset because they had a team that could have really done a lot better, at least on paper, for a record. But unfortunately, that's not what we saw. And I'm not saying that the team played bad by any means. I'm just saying it's upsetting that they didn't have a better record because they could have had a better record. And what was upsetting is how bad the team started hitting towards the end of the season. They just couldn't seem to get on base or get home no matter what they did, and that caused them to lose quite a few games that they shouldn't have. But their defense was really, really good, and that allowed them to just play at a caliber that they shouldn't have been playing because of their hitting, but they were still able to win games close. And goddamn, was any game with the Noodlers just great because of how close the games were, but it wasn't exactly the best ball being played. What was not upsetting is that the Nate Noodlers gained a second Nate halfway through the season, so they became the Nate and Nate Noodlers, which is great, and we'd love to see that. And going into next season, one of the Nates is going to have their own team called the BJ Brothers, and they're the expansion team, which is great. We're gonna have 10 teams now. An even season. Nobody gets a bye anymore, which is fine because that just means everybody gets to see their team play every single week. But their upsets go into the playoffs, which I'm not going to tell you exactly what kind of upsets those are, because I'll tell you later. Of course, I'll tell you later.
Cha-ching!
The Kangaroos was a story full of gambles that always seemed to have the house winning and never letting the player cash out with a grand prize. The Kangaroos tried to start off season 1 with a bang by winning the entire damn thing, and they put a lot on the line for it, trading a first, second, and fourth round pick for a lot. That first round pick going to Ritter and giving the Bowser Monsters a second first round pick for season 2, which is insane because that team was already really good, and now they get 2 first rounders, which is just out of their. I can't believe that is something that is happening. Also, the Kangaroos traded their second round pick to the Birdo Rings in exchange for the Mii Morgan, who also happens to be the owner of the Kangaroos. So the owner wanted his own Mii and was willing to give the best team in the league a second round pick for that. And actually, I was wrong. The Kangaroos made a trade with the Peach Monarchs. The Kangaroos gave the Monarchs Cam in exchange for a fourth round pick. So they actually have 2 fourth round picks, but their first pick of the season 2 draft will be in round 3, which is tough because a lot of the good players that will be leaving some of these teams are certainly going to be picked up by then. And it confused the whole league that a team with Petey Piranha, Wiggler, D-Day, and Ritter only went 9-7 and managed to lose some interesting games like against the Simians. That just it wasn't expected for them to lose that, and expected them to win, and they were expected to be a competitor against the Vermonsters, against the Rings, and against the Monsters, but they always seem to fall just a little short, and there is no rhyme or reason as to why that happened. It's just it did happen, which is very unfortunate because they gambled so much. But that is just the regular season, and you're gonna have to wait to hear if their gambling paid off in the playoffs or not. as I said earlier, the Vermonsters were just a heavy-hitting team, and they're a story of heavy hitters, having players like Kincaid Rule, Britter, Purple Drank, Mario, Fire Bro. I mean, and I could go on, and you would expect Purple Drank to really be a heavy hitter, but he had quite a few home runs along with P-Toad. But the team went through some iterations, and that would be getting rid of Toadsworth, who seemed to be a really good player to pick up in a mid round, as his pitch confused the entire league, but his pitches were really slow, and that was really the only mind-boggling thing about them. And as the league evolved during the season, they realized how to hit off of Toadsworth, and that caused for many early losses early on, which is one of the reasons you could say maybe they lost to the Monarchs during that game. And that's when Margaret Qualley made her appearance onto the team, and that completely shifted chemistry around and seemed to be overall just better for the Vermonsters, but they still suffered some really bad losses to the Birdo Rings, who finishes the 1 seed, and that's a different story for the Birdo Rings. Sorry, I almost said the name of the team. Anyways, Mario was arguably one of the biggest upsets on the team, not batting very well. He seemed to stick to slap hits a lot because he was trying to save face. He's the poster child. He has to look good and try to get on base constantly, but that ended up not working out for him, and he got quite a few home runs when he really did try to swing for the fences, and he should have done that more often, as it would have made him look like a better player, because looking at a player like Kinky Ruler Britter, they always swung for the fences, and it was always amazing. That's why they are cherished on the Vermonsters team. But Mario slap hitting and just getting out is a lot less. It's very underwhelming compared to if he had hit a ball sky high and it almost was a home run when there was no chance of it ever being a home run. The Vermonsters set the regular season like highest scoring game at 31, and that is the score to beat during the regular season, and they set that against the Bowser Monsters, which that's two of the losses that the Monsters suffered throughout the entire season, which I was wrong earlier when I was saying that. They had 3 losses, not 2. They weren't tied with the Rings. If they were tied with the Rings, that, you know what, that's a different story. I don't know why I'm getting into that right now. This is about the Vermonsters, dude. And overall, they had a good season with only 5 losses, so not a lot to go around, but plenty of wins with 11. So, Vermonsters fans were eating quite well this season. The Bowser Monsters were just a story of dominance in every single way that you want to take that. This team had almost no chemistry, like, at all. Bowser maybe had chemistry with a few players, like Blue Drybones, but other than that, dude, they had no fucking chemistry at all. Excuse my French. Don't excuse my French, because they had no chemistry. They were just straight fucking offense. Straight offense. Nothing else, dude. If they were putting up 10 plus points a game, then they were losing. And sometimes, when they put up 10 points a game, over 10 points a game against the Monsters, they would still lose, because that's just how it fucking rolled, because of how good the Vermonsters hit against the Monsters. The Battle of the Monsters was always a great time. But it's almost kind of a miracle that they were able to sweep the Birdo Rings in a series, because the Rings were just such an optimized team that it's surprising that their offense was able to just blow through the Rings each time that they played. And, you know, I think that the Monsters deserved the 1 seed more, but they did unfortunately lose that one game against the Mansions early on, which was before your team kind of settled in. And even though they didn't have the in-game chemistry, they certainly had chemistry that just wasn't through the code. And it was very interesting that they traded Ritter away, because that would have been some insane firepower for the team, but who knows what would have happened if they had kept him, because they still only lost 3 games. They still had an amazing season, and they got a first-round pick out of that, which could be used to have another amazing season. So, the Monsters were dominant in the sense that they put down every single team that they played against, not because their defense was amazing, but because they just knew how to put on a fucking show. And they also got dominated twice by the Vermonsters and once by the Luigi Mansions. Yes, you heard that right. The best team in the league, the Birdo Rings, who were the 1 seed, were the most hated team in the McHunkers Sluggers League. They were simply just the most optimized team in the league by far. They followed a common theme of just being green. Every character was green, and that was suited by green needs. So everyone just had chemistry, and this was perfect because there was a hidden feature that we didn't know existed at the time that I found out through Akamos just a few days ago, actually, where if a batter has 3 people on bases that they have chemistry with, then they will have 1.5 times hitting power. And that explains why this team hit so unbelievably well because of that factor. They were able to slap hit a lot better because of it. They were able to just have more hitting power, so they were able to go farther and hit those holes. They were just optimized beyond belief, and we knew that, but we didn't know the extent to which they were optimized. And the team just played good ball, and we hate to say that, but they did just play good ball. Again, they were finding the holes where they could just get a slap hit to get on the base. Their heavy hitters were heavily hitting, and that would be Birdo, Pink Pianta, Gritter, Slammer Bro, sometimes Green Shot Guy, sometimes Green Dry Bones, and that is 6 out of 9 of the members of that team that could hit a home run regularly. So why aren't they the story of the heavy hitters? Because they're not exactly the heavy hitters. Yes, they were getting home runs every game, but they weren't getting enormous amounts of home runs, and they weren't just known for home runs. They were very spread out between each character and not just certain characters. So I don't think that the whole team were heavy hitters, because yes, the whole team could hit a home run, but it wasn't every character always hitting a home run every game, if that makes any sense. If not, I don't know, I'm just yapping to you, I guess. I don't know. Their only 2 losses came to the Bowser Monsters, who, again, surprising that they lost to the Bowser Monsters because there's no chemistry there to stop any home runs that could be coming from the chemistry on the bases. Not to mention that the item usage by the players seemed unreal because they were hitting every shell, every fire, every banana, every bomb, every POW, no matter what, which no other teams could seem to do. And it seemed like they were cheating and perhaps paid off the refs. They were deemed the chiefs of the league, and they probably still will be going into next season. So enough with the stories of each individual team. Let's get into the story of the playoffs, where the 6-seeded Sam Simians played the 3rd-seeded Vermonsters. And there's nothing really great to talk about here. The Vermonsters swept the Simians, and the games really weren't that close. And the Simians really weren't expected to win here, and they played decent football. They played decent baseball, and they showed up at, to every game and gave it their best. But the Vermonsters just had them outclassed and swept them the whole season. The Noodlers and the Kangaroos, the 4th and 5th seed, played, and wow, was that a series and a half. Game 1 was tight until the 9th inning, where the Noodlers barely managed to slip by with the win, upsetting the Kangaroos. Game 2, out of best of 3, went into overtime, which was an amazing game to watch and had everybody in the McHunkers Sluggers League community jumping for joy, because we just saw some of the best baseball that we've ever seen, and it ended with the Noodlers winning and sweeping the Kangaroos. This is partially to Yoshi. I forgot to mention this earlier, but Yoshi was a big downside to the Kangaroos and can be somewhat of an explanation to why the team was bad, but it's only 1 player compared to the other 8. But in both games, Yoshi was the last out and contributed to a lot of runs happening because of his slowness. So this led to the 3-seeded Vermonsters playing the 2-seeded Monsters. Battle of the Monsters, best of 5 in the semifinals, and long story short, the Vermonsters won the series 3-1. where they set a postseason record of 41 points against the Monsters, which is kind of crazy. And the Vermonsters didn't buy their way a ticket. They earned their ticket to the finals by demolishing the Monsters. So this leaves the 5th seeded Noodlers to play the 1st seeded Birdo Rings. And this was an amazing series. Game 1 was won by the Rings. Game 2 and 3 were won by the Noodlers, and this had everybody in the McHunkers Sluggers League community jumping for joy as the Noodlers were up because they were the underdogs. They had just upset the Kangaroos, and we thought we were going to see a second upset, and arguably the biggest upset against the Rings. But Game 4 goes to Rings, and unfortunately for the community, but fortunately for the Rings won and captured their ticket to the finals against the Vermonsters. And for the community, they wanted to see the Monsters versus the Noodlers in the finals, or at the very least, the Vermonsters versus the Noodlers in the finals. But it was what everybody thought it was going to be, which is Vermonsters Rings, which you'll see how that played out. The finals are a best of 7, which the Rings, oh my goodness, took game 1. Games 2, 3, and 4 went to the Vermonsters, and the Vermonsters being up 3-1, everybody thought the Vermonsters have this. Games 5 and 6 go to the Rings, so now it's tied 3-3, and in Game 7, it was just a one-sided affair with the Rings winning 30-2, which is just very, very unfortunate, and that's the game that I have playing right now. It was not a great game to watch. Everybody wanted at least a better or close game, but congratulations to the Birdo Rings as they're the McHunkers Sluggers Season 1 champion, and we'll see if they can bring that energy into Season 2, but now that everybody has a better understanding of how the game works, I think that they're going to have a harder time winning this season, but that could come back to bite me in the ass. We did host an all-star game where the Bunswick Meat Conference and McHunk Conference elected the best 9 players from each conference, with at least one being from each single team, to play against each other and just to, for fun, for sport, just to see which conference has, bragging rights going into Season 2, and the Bunswick Meat Conference completely fucked the McHunk Conference, and we love to see that. So they have bragging rights going into Season 2 for that all-star game. We also hosted an award ceremony to, give all the players an award, like MVP, OPOY, DPOY. So I'll go over that real quick. We started with the least valuable player, which went to Steven, and the least valuable me went to Steven, and the least valuable captain went to Yoshi because he was awful. The most valuable Noki was Red Noki, and by default, because they were the only Noki that ever played throughout the season. The most valuable me was Nathan, because he did wonders for the Noodlers. The most valuable Shy Guy was Gray Guy, as his defensive performance showed that he was just, one of the backbones of the Luigi Mansions not finishing 0-16. The most valuable Bone was D-Day, as he was just the best out of all of them and had the most charm. But I think Blue Dry Bones also could have had a great case. The most valuable Bro went to Whammer Bro, aka Hammer Bro, for just being the best bro. And the Yoshi went to Roshi, as he was a bigger part of that Bowser Monster offense that nobody thought he would add that much to it, but he did. The most valuable Toad went to Purple Drink for, just being, again, it's why he got the award. He's just the best Toad. Purple Drink, come on, dude. The most improved player was Shohei Ohtani, as he really showed that he can play baseball on the Morbidly Obese. The most valuable Critter went to Red Critter, which I think Brown Critter got snubbed, but that is completely besides the point. The most valuable pitcher went to Wiggler, as they had many, many strikeouts. I don't have the exact number, but one of the reasons that the Kangaroos played really well defensively. Most valuable captain went to Bowser, as he is the backbone of that offense. The defensive player of the year was Obliterator, as he is one of the reasons that the Peach Monarchs didn't go 0-16. Offensive player of the year was King K. Rool, where he had many games with 3+ home runs. More than just a hat trick. I don't even know what you want to call that. And the MVP, to nobody's surprise, he has it in his nickname, is Petey Piranha, aka MVP. He played an amazing season. So all that's left is the retention rate and the draft for Season 2, and then Season 2 can start, and the retention rate I will go over in a separate video once all of that has been figured out and what players are going to be retained, which players stay and leave the teams, and then the draft will be its own separate video describing who got picked and who didn't. I don't have an exact date for when Season 2 will start, but it should start around mid-January, as that's when everybody will be back together to be able to go over this magical new season. That's all that I have for the McHunkers Sluggers Season 1 recap. If you enjoyed, I don't know, do whatever you want with your free time now that you've finished this like 40-minute long video. Stay frosty, but not too frosty because it's getting really cold out there.